States of the Union presents the premier exhibition of selections from TCU's permanent art collection. This exhibition's artworks, in either context, content, and/or style, present American history, culture, and politics as interpreted by artists, some of whom were employees of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's Works Progress Administration, civil rights leaders, and military veterans. In diverse ways and differing media, these artists' compositions provoke intriguing questions regarding national identity, values, and conflicts. By referencing or being influenced by American history, culture, and politics, these artworks cause us to consider our relationship to our national past.
We are fortunate enough to have a copy of one of the most recognized portraits of George Washington in the TCU permanent collection. The original Athenaeum portrait was completed by Gilbert Stuart in 1796, and this portrait graces the dollar bill. The portrait in the TCU collection was completed by Stuart's daughter Jane sometime between 1826 and 1888, the span of her career as an artist. The exhibit also features the accompanying portrait of Martha Washington. Jane Stuart's greatest success was found in producing copies of her father's portraits of the Washingtons, and she enjoyed a long career producing copies of her father's portraits as well as her own original work. Jane Stuart has not been widely written about as an artist. Indeed, she is often mentioned only in relation to her father's career. We were very glad to be able to feature these works, not only to highlight Jane Stuart as an artist, but to also feature our nation's first president and first lady as the opening for our exhibition.
Barnett's serigraph entitled Ariadne strays from his signature subject matter of scenes of his surroundings as it fits into a series of mythological works in which Barnett looked to ancient sources in order to convey a sense of the iconic and eternal. The piece depicts the creation goddess calling to mind the scenes of profiled figures found on Greek vases, a reference stemming from Barnett's fascination of classical Greek art as a child. Under the Works Project Administration during the Great Depression, artists were commissioned to complete public projects in an attempt to relieve the extreme poverty at the time. Artists Will Barnett, Lee Krasner, and Alice Neel each participated in the WPA in varying degrees. In addition to teaching at the Art Students League of New York for over 40 years, Will Barnett served as the technical advisor in lithography for the WPA during the 1930s. He is known for his abstraction and highly simplified figurative works, primarily depicting familial scenes. This is evident with his serigraph entitled Summer, which portrays his wife and daughter in a setting of domestic tranquility inspired by summer vacations spent in Maine. Lee Krasner, a prominent figure of the abstract expressionist movement, participated actively in the WPA, maintaining a supervisory role in the mural division beginning in 1934. Blue Stone is one in a series of 3 prints commissioned by the Moudy Gallery in 1969 in New York. Around 1979, Krasner began to incorporate her prints, particularly motivated by this series, into new collaged works. She would cut out pieces of her prints and rearrange them or use them as backgrounds to paintings, allowing them to take on the second life in some of her later works. Alice Neel is now regarded as one of the major portraitists of the 20th century. However, for the majority of her lifetime, she was hardly recognized and depended on the WPA during the 1930s for financial support. This was partly due to her emphasis on portraiture, which was a genre somewhat overshadowed for a period of time by the popular abstract expressionist movement. Neel was extremely interested in analyzing humanity and the people who surrounded her. She aimed to portray not only the attributes of her subjects in her works, but also their inner character, and believed that part of the sitter remained with her after a painting was completed. This connection to her subject matter creates a demanding psychological depth in her work. Her portrait entitled John portrays John Rothschild, a wealthy Harvard graduate. Despite their differences of lifestyles, Rothschild remained Neel's lifelong friend and greatly supported her work.
Larry Rivers, who has been called the godfather of pop art, employs a collage-like style in this screen print titled Black Review from 1970. The bold blue line in this work serves to visually connect 3 prominent black historical figures. The largest is Crispus Attucks, a black man who is considered to be the first American killed in the Revolutionary War during the 1770 Boston Massacre. This work is from the Boston Massacre series, and in the right-hand corner, we can see that Rivers addressed this painting to Crispus A. The line then moves chronologically to a newspaper photograph of James Meredith, a black man who was the first black student admitted to the previously segregated University of Mississippi. This newspaper clipping comes from the day after Meredith was shot in the 1966 Civil Rights March Against Fear protest. The last name figure in this work is Yusef Komunyakaa, an American poet who writes about the southern United States before the Civil Rights era and his experiences as a black soldier in the Vietnam War. Black Review visually and conceptually links 3 black American men who fought for American rights or in American wars. This lithograph from 1979 is titled In the Garden by African-American artist Romare Bearden. Bearden was influenced by many artists of the Harlem Renaissance, which flourished in New York from the 1920s to mid-1930s. Bearden served in the U.S. Army in World War II and would later study art and philosophy at the Sorbonne in Paris on the GI Bill. In 1987, President Ronald Reagan awarded Bearden with the National Medal of Arts. Bearden began his artistic career by contributing political cartoons to the Baltimore Afro-American magazine. Later, in the 1960s, he began creating works in his most well-recognized medium, collage. The blocks of color and distinct shapes in this work allude to Bearden's collages. This reference is best seen in the figure's disjointed head, which almost entirely floats above the body, and in the figure's face that is defined by the purple background color that Bearden reveals through the black ink. In 1963, Bearden co-founded the artist group, Spiral. In the Garden exemplifies Spiral's goal of artistic representation of African Americans by African Americans.
McKee Trotter, or Mac, was a member of the Fort Worth Circle, a group of Texas artists active in the 1940s and 1950s that painted in various modern styles. Before his career as a painter, Trotter served as an infantry captain in World War II. He was taken prisoner by the Germans in 1944 and endured numerous hardships until his release and return to America. The 2 Levels series is a personal reflection on his difficult experience as a prisoner of war. As you can see in 2 Levels number 7, Trotter employed a palette of grays with striking red elements, implying violence, somberness, and sorrow. After his return to the States, Trotter held various teaching jobs before acquiring a position as a professor at TCU, where he would remain for the rest of his life. In his teaching and in his artwork, Trotter was always an ardent advocate of modern art and abstraction. His work has been included in exhibitions and shows across the country, both during his lifetime and after, continuing his legacy as an avant-garde Texas artist.
The Cowboys and Indians series from 1986 is considered to be one of the last of Andy Warhol's works. The series is based off of photographs from the old American West. Here we have portraits of Annie Oakley and Sitting Bull. Annie Oakley was the most famous female sharpshooter in American history. In 1885, both Oakley and Sitting Bull performed in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. However, Sitting Bull's participation in the show was under very different circumstances. Sitting Bull was a Lakota Indian and leader of the Sioux people, who famously resisted the American government's seizure of native lands and treatment of American Indians. To participate in the show, the American government allowed Sitting Bull to leave the reservation as a propagandistic token of a vanishing people. By reprinting and revising images of the Old West in his pop art style, Warhol emphasizes the painful irony of Sitting Bull's status as a celebrity performer.
States of the Union also features 2 works by Pulitzer Prize-winning political cartoonist Bill Mauldin. Mauldin was particularly known for his cartoon collection, Up Front, which featured soldiers in Europe during World War II. This collection of cartoons was very popular with World War II veterans who felt that Mauldin had captured the realities of their experiences. After the war, Mauldin continued to focus on documenting current events and contemporary figures through his cartoons. This included Presidents Richard Nixon and Lyndon Johnson. Mauldin's portraits of these presidents in the TCU collection are gestural caricatures, and this contrasts well with the traditional naturalistic portraits painted by Jane Stuart. Mauldin lived in a nursing home in California prior to his death in 2003, and almost every day veterans from all over the country visited him to thank him for chronicling the experience of the average soldier.
The son of an illegal immigrant from Mexico, Luis Jimenez was raised in El Paso. His experience working in his father's neon sign shop and the low-rider car culture in that border town would influence him greatly in his choice of materials for his artwork later on in life. His most famous works are large sculptures made of fiberglass and colored with car paint that show contorted vaqueros and livestock that rive with movement, such as Progress 2 at the Blanton Museum of Art in Austin. Jimenez's sculptures present the vaquero as the original cowboy, a subtle critique of the American appropriation of Mexican culture. Jimenez's lithographs also critically assess American culture and politics as they relate to Latin America. In Coscolino con Muerte, or Flirting with Death, Jimenez is clearly critiquing America's involvement in the Iran-Contra affair of 1986 and 1987, as well as America's role in the political conflicts of other Latin American countries, including Guatemala and El Salvador. The lascivious American dame, with her tight dress and seductive smile, clearly communicate Jimenez's opinions of the United States at that time. Antonio Alvarez completed his master's thesis entitled Baby Dr. Jesus Reveals Magic Gringoism at TCU in 2000. The two works included in States of the Union, George Washington Crossing the Trinity River, and Medium Courthouse were completed during his stay in Fort Worth. George Washington Crossing the Trinity River clearly adopts the iconic portrait of George Washington from the dollar bill, a version of which, by Jane Stuart, can be seen nearby. Alvarez, in contrast to Luis Jimenez, employs humor as a tool for critiquing American culture and politics. He placed George Washington's head on top of a Hulk-like body inspired by the monumental figures of Paul Bunyan that are used as advertising for businesses across the country, most commonly muffler shops and hardware stores. Both of Alvarez's works employ a multitude of signs, giving his work a layered and complex meaning. Alvarez intended for the viewer to draw their own conclusions based on his hidden signs, and both of these works are littered with icons of American culture and local Fort Worth life. More information on these symbols is available in the catalog, but we encourage you to look for yourself and provide your own interpretation of the work. Alvarez now lives in Puebla, Mexico, where he teaches art at the University of the Americas.